there's a really fun river moment. That's all I'm going to say. Same way in Blood Meridian, there's a, I don't know if you want to call it fun, but you'll remember the river moment. Hello everyone, welcome to Books and Booze, a series where I talk about books and I have some booze. I'm Alex. So this video is going to be a little bit different than the other videos that I usually do in this series, which are more like in-depth book reviews. This is going to be a book list video. I really like book list videos. I'm clicking on them all the time, so I figured why not put something out there of something that I like, and I feel pretty confident in the list that I can make here for you today. So given Cormac McCarthy's recent passing, and there was kind of a renaissance for his novel Blood Meridian going on even leading up to that, I figured why not talk about some books that if you like Blood Meridian, I think that you'll also really like. I kind of had a lead up to Blood Meridian, so all these books are books that kind of guided me toward reading Blood Meridian, which is now one of my favorite novels of all time. So the way I'm going to organize this list is also a little bit different than other book lists I've seen. These are in no particular order, but rather the first few are going to be pretty close in terms of style, tone, themes to Blood Meridian, and then the ones later on will be a little bit more out there, but they'll still parallel in certain ways, and I'll explain that. So with each book, I'll give it a summary, and then I'll kind of explain why I think you might like it, given certain components about Blood Meridian. I'll also be finishing off a bottle of Old Forester 1920, which is one of my favorite bourbons of all time. So, all around favorites in this video, and somehow just fitting to have it in a mason jar. So cheers to Cormac McCarthy and all the other writers in this list that we'll get into. And as for the bourbon, because sometimes I just kind of mention the drinks on here, that is just phenomenal. It clearly is one of my favorites given the bottle is now gone. If you like more rich flavor profiles to your bourbon, like a very rich caramel, this almost has like a deep brown sugar flavor to it, then you should definitely seek this out. It's more in line with those warm spices you get, not so much more of like the light vanilla oaky kind of flavors you can get with some other bourbons. So first up is actually my favorite writer of all time, though it's not my favorite work of hers, The Violent Bear It Away by Flannery O'Connor. The Violent Bear It Away is a 1960 novel by Flannery O'Connor, and it focuses on this character called Francis Tarwater, who's just a 14-year-old boy who ends up escaping this quasi-kidnapping that his uncle, who kidnapped him, has, and he's ultimately trying to get away from this destiny that his uncle has kind of prescribed to him, that of being a prophet. And part of his destiny that his uncle gave him was to baptize his half-brother, I believe. There's all kinds of weird family dynamics in this book, who has Down syndrome, against his original father's wishes, as he kind of aims to stand against everything that Tarwater's uncle stood for. So without giving too much away, that's kind of the central tension of the novel. And it becomes this battle between like secular stoicism and like really explosive, charismatic spirituality. And as you might guess, if you're familiar with Flannery O'Connor's work, it gets weird, it gets dark, it gets violent, and it just has incredible writing surrounding kind of all the weird events that end up transpiring over the course of this conflict in the novel. So other than O'Connor's very similar style to McCarthy, which is very simple and kind of direct writing, interspersed with very beautiful descriptions of settings and the events going on around the characters, I think the prophet angle that you get in this book gives this sort of apocalyptic tone to The Violent Bear It Away, and you get a lot of that in Blood Meridian as well. I'm specifically thinking of when the Mennonite warns the gang about going further into Mexico, and then that's just kind of foreshadowing the rest of the book's tone. This has a very similar vibe to that. A lot of doom and gloom prophecy just being spouted here and there throughout the novel. And if you were kind of intrigued by the character of Judge Holden in Blood Meridian, and you view him as something demonic, as many readers, including myself, do, There's a very interesting demonic character in this book as well, without giving too much away. Shows up early on, and it keeps showing up here and there again, so if you also like that part of Blood Meridian, you might dig that here. And though Blood Meridian is not too keen on a lot of spiritual themes up front, you can certainly read that into it. This is a little bit more upfront about its spiritual themes, but if you were interested, drawn to that in Blood Meridian, then I would really encourage you to pick this one up as well. So next on my list, I actually don't have a physical copy of it because I listened to it on an audiobook a while back, but I would encourage you to either get it on audiobook or a physical copy. It is The Devil All the Time by Donald Ray Pollock. The Devil All the Time is actually Donald Ray Pollock's debut novel, and it came out in 2011. And its plot follows various characters and plot lines throughout this post-World War II rural southern Ohio as well as West Virginia. And some of these storylines include a disturbed war veteran who kind of becomes crazed by the death of his wife and starts all these weird sacrificial practices to God. Another storyline follows a husband and wife who are serial killers, and another storyline involves an abusive, exploitive preacher kind of infiltrating this small town. And all these are just some of the plot lines in the book. There's even smaller plot lines and characters that show up here and there, but they all tend to revolve around this coming of age story around a character named Arvin. And as the title might suggest, it's incredibly dark, yet I think it really aims to make meaning while facing some very difficult realities of our world. So if you like the scathing portrayal of human nature in Blood Meridian, I think you're going to like this book. It very much does the same thing. It is insanely dark and twisted and disturbing at times. You might get that similar feeling that many people describe of like just wanting to put it down and step away for a bit that people have while reading Blood Meridian. And in the same way, I think Pollock doesn't place his violence and darkness in the book without purpose and meaning the same way McCarthy does in Blood Meridian. It's not really a shock factor. It doesn't come off in poor taste in any way, but really I think he finds it necessary to discuss some of the things that go on in it. I applaud Pollock for his portrayal of some realities about the pornography industry that many people don't want to touch, and he touches that in this book, and it's incredibly difficult to digest, but just all the power to him for doing it. And if you also kind of dug Blood Meridian, maybe, this is debatable, as a coming-of-age story that is a character sort of learning about darkness and light of the world and God while grappling with a lot of like moral ambiguity in a very fallen world. I think Devil All the Time has a very similar fallen world, hellish landscape to Blood Meridian. And that comes with one caveat, is that the style of The Devil All the Time is quite different from the style of Blood Meridian. It actually kind of has this narrator, almost like sitting around the campfire delivery to all of its stories, so it has this strange distance to it. Not so much as Blood Meridian is just kind of that disembodied third-person voice guiding you through everything going on. So it might jar you at first, but I think once you ease into it, if you like Blood Meridian, you're really going to like The Devil All the Time. And then third on the list is a major classic and one of my favorites of all time. It is William Faulkner's As I Lay Dying. It might not need any introduction, but As I Lay Dying is a 1930 novel. Many people describe it as a Southern Gothic novel by William Faulkner, one of the titans of American literature. And similar to Devil All the Time, this book is narrated by many characters, I believe 15 different characters. It just intersperses throughout different chapters who's narrating, and you know it by the chapter title, and there's like 59 chapters in the book. It is pretty experimental and a little bit jarring to get into, but once you piece it together, the story is about the death of a character named Addie Budrin and her very poor rural family's quest and motivations, which are all kind of mixed and mangled. Some are very noble, some are very selfish and kind of devious, to honor her wish to be buried in her hometown of Jefferson, Mississippi. So, without giving too much away, because it kind of just it's not too long of a book. You kind of already start getting into spoiler territory pretty fast. If you liked the style of Blood Meridian, I think you're really going to like this. McCarthy was very influenced by Faulkner throughout various works, and I believe Blood Meridian is often considered one of those works that was very influenced by Faulkner's style, and it shows. The novel uses a stream of conscious writing technique, and all those multiple narrators, the varying chapter lengths. There's a lot of really weird experimental things in this book. Some of the chapters are just one sentence. Some of the chapters use drawings and diagrams in the middle of paragraphs. It gets very weird, and Faulkner is known for a very long-winded style that can kind of bog you down a little bit. So I give this with the caveat of, if you're not used to reading Faulkner, you might end up relying on something like Shmoop or SparkNotes, and there's absolutely no shame in that. If it helps you enjoy the book more, and I think it would, seek out those resources or other people talking about it on YouTube or something. And the other thing is just, in terms of style, the description of the settings, the sparse dialogue, the way that dialogue is presented is very similar to that in Blood Meridian. And I also think if you kind of liked the setup of a journey in Blood Meridian, which it's kind of there, these characters traversing, this is very much the same thing. The novel takes its name from a line in the Odyssey, and it's pulling on a very similar motif about this journey, this kind of setup to reveal something about these characters as they travel, and the travel itself, the journey itself, is going to reveal those things to you, not necessarily the end goal in mind, in the same way that probably Blood Meridian does that. And in a very, similar parallel, without giving too much away, there's a really fun river moment. That's all I'm going to say. Same way in Blood Meridian, there's I don't know if you want to call it fun, but you'll remember the river moment. So, before I get into two of my suggestions that I think are pretty out there, this is our bonus book. It's Paradise Lost by John Milton. So, speaking of having to go to SparkNotes or Shmoop to actually enjoy what you're reading or get more understanding, this is certainly that book. I would really encourage you to seek out supplemental resources for approaching Paradise Lost, and the reason I'm putting it in here is that Paradise Lost is one of the largest influences on McCarthy while he was writing Blood Meridian. In fact, entire sections from Paradise Lost are actually redescribed, reused, just very direct allusions in Blood Meridian. The biggest example that most people point to is when Judge Holden makes gunpowder out of just natural resources and his urine. It's very similar, at times almost a direct parallel, to when Lucifer and all the fallen angels are creating gunpowder and cannons in Paradise Lost. And of course that means that a lot of the themes and the tone of Blood Meridian were taken from Paradise Lost, especially the theme of kind of the fall, a fallen world, the nature of sin, and how that operates in the world is very much taken from Paradise Lost, and Milton being a major influence on kind of those specific themes for McCarthy in that novel. So, as I said, these next two ones are going to be a little bit more out there, but I think there's a lot of parallels in terms of themes and tone that if you like Blood Meridian, you might dig these even though they're not as similar as the other three novels that I just mentioned. The first one is Between Two Fires by Christopher Buehlman. Now, Between Two Fires is a 2012 period piece horror adventure novel. I've actually talked about this novel on the channel before, and I really love this book. I'll link that video in the description below if you're interested in learning a bit more about it based off what you hear here. The novel is set during the Black Plague, and it follows a disgraced knight and kind of this failing priest and this very weird, mysterious young girl who has certain abilities as they travel across medieval France at the same time that Lucifer and other fallen angels are waging their war against God in heaven. And all these kind of events intersperse with each other, which leads to a very intriguing novel with a very intriguing setting. So, similar to As I Lay Dying, if you liked that sort of journey setup and framework for the narrative as Blood Meridian has, then you're going to like this as well. It's about these characters going on a journey through a hellish landscape, literally at times in this novel, a hellish landscape. And it has similar themes again to traversing that fallen world and having to tackle with the nature of sin and kind of having weird, kind of fun, metaphysical and supernatural stuff occurring in a very grounded and realistic world like Blood Meridian has. Although, what I will say is I find Between Two Fires a bit more hopeful than Blood Meridian. Some other big themes occur in Between Two Fires, like redemption and salvation, where Blood Meridian is more about just the sin and evil. And similar to Blood Meridian, I think this novel does an excellent job at characterizing evil and good. So if you liked unpacking more of the theological and spiritual themes from Blood Meridian, I think that you might like Between Two Fires, despite the fact that it's a straight horror novel. I know a lot of people actually interpret Blood Meridian as a horror novel. This very much wants to be a horror novel at times. Its tagline is an epic tale of medieval horror, so just know that as you're going into it. And last but certainly not least, another one of my favorite writers, we have The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea by Yukio Mishima. What a title. Now this probably is the most out there compared to Blood Meridian book that I have on this list. The Sailor Who Fell from Grace with the Sea is originally 1963, though I think it was translated a few years later in English, a Japanese novel by Yukio Mishima. I've talked about Mishima on this channel before, but not this book specifically, which was actually the first book that I ever read by him, and I instantly fell in love with it. I enjoy his work a lot, and I encourage you to maybe go check out my video review on After the Banquet that I have on this channel. This story follows the actions of an adolescent boy living in Yokohama, also in a post-World War II Japan. And it mainly centers on him and his group of friends who don't believe in any kind of like conventional moral code or morality, and they're led by this ambiguous character who I believe is a child called the Chief. You know, sounds kind of familiar, a bunch of people being led by some weird, morally ambiguous character. And then the novel centers upon this tension that happens between the boy's widowed mother falling in love with this sailor who is kind of this icon or hero of masculinity that these boys want this man to be. However, holes start to get punctured into this myth that these kids created around this sailor, and then the novel takes a very slow turn into something more sinister. So one of the big things similar to Blood Meridian, and if you like this in Blood Meridian, that you get from the start of this novel as well as Blood Meridian is that boy ain't right. So if you were intrigued by the kid and if his just strange propensity toward violence and his like thirst for evil at the beginning of Blood Meridian, I think you're going to dig this because you kind of get it right at the beginning of this novel as well, and you'll kind of be questioning that and trying to figure out why is that the case over the course of the story. And I think Mishima, at least in this translation, which comes from John Nathan, this is part of the Vintage Classic series, the style is very similar to that of McCarthy. Yet at the same time, he is certainly concerned with weighty philosophical themes that come through in the story, such as heroism, death, Japanese nationalism, and identity. If you know anything about Yukio Mishima's life, which is way too much to get into in this video, you know these things were very much top of mind for him over the course of his life. So if you liked unpacking a lot more of the philosophical themes of Blood Meridian, then I think you might dig this novel. And I also want to say that tonally, I think Blood Meridian fans will dig this. There's a similar attitude of mixing very beautiful language with very dark and disturbing moments throughout the novel to kind of try to make you reconsider what is actually occurring, at least on, I mean, you name it kind of level. To me, it's kind of a spiritual level. To others, it might just be that philosophical level, but there's a deeper level occurring to these events that, you know, others might want to dismiss and kind of move away from. So there you have it. That's 5 books that if you liked Blood Meridian that I think that you'll dig. These books led me on to Blood Meridian and McCarthy, whose writings I am now kind of digging into and I'm really enjoying. And like I said, this was a little bit of a one-off video. This is the first list video I did. If you liked this, please give this video a like. Let me know in the comments. That way I know if you like this and I'll keep making them. Also let me know in the comments if there's any other books that either led you to Blood Meridian or that you find are similar to Blood Meridian that you think other people that like Blood Meridian or just McCarthy's writing in general might also dig. So put that in the comments and we can start a conversation about it. And also, if you like in-depth book reviews, if you like video essays, that's what I do on this channel. Please consider subscribing and seeing what else I have on this channel. But with that, I just want to give one last toast to all the writers that we went through, and especially Cormac McCarthy, especially for his masterpiece, Blood Meridian. Just salute to Cormac McCarthy and all the writers that we got to talk about here today. Once again, thank you for watching this, and I will see you all in future explorations.